So let's talk about something else we've been watching this week. We're going to
Yep.
talk about Patlabor, the original OVA. I do not actually have the video for this, unfortunately. But we'll just have to talk through it because this is going to be fun. So, our experiences with Patlabor. I tried watching. Let's rewind a little bit more. Patlabor, I would say one of the sort of big, say, half dozen Mecha franchises. Up there with Gundam and Macross and the others. A lot of different series. And this is the original OVA, which basically kicked it all off from 1988 to 89. And it did get released over here in America in the 90s
Right.
by, I think, Central Park Media.
Yep.
There's a blast from the past.
There's a blast. Yeah.
Gosh. So they that was the thing, and so I watched it more or less when it first was released over here in America, and tried the first episode, and I just couldn't get it. It was just the pacing was weird, introduction of the characters was weird, and so I didn't hate it, but I was like, I'll come back to this later, maybe. Fast forward, decades. Um,
Little
and
time passed.
little time passed. Ended up watching the two movies, or the three movies, and then came into it again this time and enjoyed it a lot more. Like it definitely worked once I kind of got into it and got through it. So that's kind of where I am with Patlabor. What's your history with Patlabor?
I love. No. I really.
It's right behind you. Yep.
Yeah, right there. Um, so I watched it when it first came over. Watched it on cable. I think I had a VHS copy of like the first two episodes. I think, and that was about it. Um, but I really enjoyed it. What I saw on television, and then years passed. Otakon, and they played. It was in one of the panel rooms where they show here's the old anime, and I'm like,
Oh.
okay, here we go. And so when they showed the first four episodes again, and I was just like, oh my god, now I remember why I loved this so much.
Mhm.
And so I really enjoyed it, and we were kind of talking before we came on. I tried watching it with the subtitles, and I didn't really like it. But I watched it with the dubs and the English dubs, and I really loved it.
Okay.
And and I don't want to start a dub sub war, but that's just my personal opinion. But I like the voice actors for the most part. Um,
I
I
appreciate
know
that
not
qualifier.
everybody does. Not everybody does.
Yeah.
But anyway, so so I watched it at Otakon. Then went on a spree of like, what? Okay, I want to get the OVA. Got the OVA. Watched the movies. Was disappointed with the third movie. Then I watched the television series, and I actually spent. It took me 3 Otakons to get the whole
Oh,
buy
wow.
the whole set, right?
Mhm.
And I kept going to the one guy who's kept like every year he'd like release a little bit at the dealer's table, just okay, Steve, you bought the first 10, now here's another 10, but I'm gonna hold off on the others because I got you hooked now. And so I eventually watched the whole television series. So and I just
Nice.
really loved it, and it's a go-to for me. So every now and again when I'm just like don't know what to watch, throw it on.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's always fun.
So Captain Laser Eyes asked, and I think we had somebody else ask as well. Matt was asking, where do you start with Patlabor? Which is a great question because you've got OVAs, you've got TV series, you've got movies.
It's kind of like Ghost in the Shell
Mm.
in that each one it's well, actually it's like Tenchi.
Mm.
Each kind of thing is its own universe.
Mm-hmm.
So the OVA is the original OVA is basically the first one. So if you watch that one, you kind of get the ground. You basically get the idea of the series.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting is the OVA eventually continues with episode 8 and continues on after that.
Mm.
But then the television series is different.
Mm.
The animation is also a lot different. And it's more expanded, and you have a lot more characters, and story arcs are longer and more grounded. It's not like
Okay.
the OVA where things kind of seem choppy a little bit.
Yeah.
and the movies are really their own thing too. They really are.
Yep.
As like basically the first two out of the three. Well, no, actually, all three movies are based are take their cues from the OVA, but they're not of the OVA universe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Boy, there's the thing.
So the long answer, short answer for that long answer was start with the OVA.
Go the OVAs. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Good question. What's the story with the TV OVA where the TV series got 2 extensions due to popularity? Watching the OVA now, and it feels just like more TV episodes. Yeah, so that's, I wouldn't say it's a common thing, but it is a thing that happens. If something is sufficiently popular, but you don't have the financing or the budget to do a movie, an OVA is kind of the easiest way to go.
Right.
Because you can just make that and release it and sell it straight to video, and fans can buy it. So yeah, and unfortunately, time slots are tricky on television.
Yeah. And that's a very true statement of using an OVA in lieu of making a movie because you don't have the budget. Because the movies, like for example, episodes, was it 5 and 6 of the OVA, which is, the taking over of Tokyo, is basically movie number 2.
Okay, yeah.
So.
Gotcha. Yeah.
By the way, folks, don't be jealous that I have shake.
Oh gosh, too late. But yeah, and to be clear, I don't know exactly why, but I'm assuming it's just because of that. Very frequently, TV slots are scheduled out pretty far in advance. So if it's popular but you don't have the time, you just kind of stuck. Well, I guess that's more true these days. Back in the 70s and 80s, it might have been different, but.
Well, wasn't Headgear kind of on a roll in the late 80s, early 90s?
Headgear?
That's the guys that made.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I don't know. So let's talk about this OVA as kind of approach. So this was the first Patlabor, which to your point was created by this sort of creative team, Headgear, and really built to be this idea. And what I find so interesting about Patlabor is that it is kind of a commentary on modern Japanese society at the time, where it's you have this idea of widespread construction robots, giant robots, and which then leads to crime, which then leads to police action, and so but it is very much about these huge construction projects you saw in Japan in the 80s. On a scale you really didn't see before, because there's a lot going on in the 60s with reconstruction and so forth. We didn't have the high technology of the 80s or the money of the 80s, which was everywhere. Yeah. So Patlabor, unlike a lot of other anime, really feels like it's set in 1988. Even though obviously it's set in a future, but it feels so real in a weird way. And I think a lot of that comes back to Goto. You have this guy who is just this. He feels so much like the career bureaucrat. Seen it all, been there, done it. Totally, nothing surprises him anymore. We've all worked with that guy.
Yeah.
Been there forever. Know the score. And it's something we don't see in anime a lot. It's just these very workaday people, I guess.
Yeah, the Goto is again one of my favorite characters in anime. They don't even make him look unique, really.
Yeah, it's true.
His eyes are half lidded, and like you were saying, he's seen it all. He's always like, launch the assault. Yeah, we know what's going to happen. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep the property damage to a minimum, please.
I love in episode 7. This isn't a spoiler. He says, "Yeah, they're probably going to do X, Y, Z," and then things happen, and they do the thing that he doesn't expect them to do, and he goes, "Oh, you're going to do that? Okay.
Oh,
You're really going to do that? Wow.
No. All right. I just love the fact that in the OVA, it's in the promising future of 1999, and I'm just like thinking to myself, going, oh, I wish we had Mecha in 1999. That would have been really nice. That would have been really nice. But I think that one of the things about this, but the other part of what I really like about Patlabor is that the technology is accessible.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, we're not talking about, um, the next proto Gundam.
Right.
We're not talking about a Gundam that can do this, that, and the other thing with, and you have to be Charles Sawble to be able to pilot, or as it's mentioned in Patlabor, an autistic kid piloting a mecha. It's a functional thing. It's like, and when they talk about it, it's like there's a realism in how they're talking about, like when they talk about the boot up disc, and they talk about how things are attached, and you look at the actual mecha itself, and it looks like, when they talked about the original Patlabors that they were using, they were former construction laborers, and you take one look at them and you're just like, well, yeah, that looks like construction labor. Yeah. That looks like it's just built and pick up steel girders. That's it.
I love one of the things that's so distinctive about Patlabor is how you can often see the head of the pilot. And that idea that you just kind of pop open the chest a little bit, and so the person can see around, because you'd want to be able to do that. This isn't you're not in space. You're just oh, what's that guy doing? So you have that visibility, and it kind of humanizes the mecha in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like I remember again, episode 7. Some random guy basically hops in this military mecha, and he goes, "Oh, it's like the one I drive for work," and you're like. Oh, right. Like, there's just a thing that it's like heavy machinery, You can
it's
drive a tractor.
If you're trained on this, you can probably figure out that. And it's just, and the other part I like about the whole mechanism of the series is, and the accessibility of it, is that it also shows the limitations. In episode 2, I think it's episode 2, Noah is in Alphonse. Alphonse is the name of her Patlabor. And she stops, and she has to stop because there's a bridge in her way.
Yeah, that's right.
She can't get over it. She can't go under it. She actually has to stop. Now, the solution is ridiculous, and it's fun, but it's, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it's just fun. Especially the reaction. You just like, of the pilot, you're just like, wait, he's into this? What? Oh, okay. But there's like a realism of just like, this isn't going to work because I'm in this giant machine that can't really articulate.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the other part. Whereas,
really.
Right. Yeah. Can't jump. It's not like the Gundams where they can, pressing the buttons and they can find, move, articulate, and stuff like that. It's just assumed that, you come across something that you would normally, that you as a person wouldn't be able to go over. This isn't going to go over it either.
Yeah, exactly. Remember, somebody said that a Gundam is a somewhat slow-moving man in samurai armor.
Yeah,
like that's how they move, right? And that's really how the animators think of them, not as machines, really. And again, it's just the trope, the approach you make. Macross is even further beyond. They're just
right.
Just do whatever. It's part of the fun of Macross. But yeah, no, absolutely. The laborers feel like these engineered for a purpose. They're here to do this thing, but you can't really go beyond that. Yeah, like driving a car, or again, like a Caterpillar tractor or something.
Right.
But yeah, and then you get and this is one of the reasons why I found the OVA a little hard for me to get into initially, is because the stories are kind of mundane to begin with. It is just, I guess, these cops doing this thing. And I think Mamoru Oshii's directing in this is rather uneven, just in the sense that, like, the characters are thrown together, you don't really know who they are, you're not given any explanation of their backgrounds or setting. And I don't expect that for everybody, but there's just a lot of material in there that I just felt like I didn't have enough context to understand why the characters were taking their actions. And that was a little frustrating to me. and just tonally, it's not all over the place, but it definitely has a variety of feels to it, which I liked a lot. But it is um, very late '80s in that way.
Yeah. So the OVA is very episodic. It's not like any other OVA where you have the long arcing story that's supposed to take you from the beginning, the middle, and the end, and with maybe a couple other character stories inside of it. Cowboy Bebop. One of the best things about it is that it goes, it's a bunch of stories that are tied together in 2 or 3 different ways.
Yeah, every fourth episode or so, you'll get a plot episode. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's that with Patlabor, the OVA. You start off with one episode and it ends, and then you get the next episode and you're just like, oh, we're going in that direction now. That ends, and then you go, oh, we're going over here now. So it does feel at first like you're like going, does this do anything? And then you realize that episodes 5 and 6 are really the story. That's what it's supposed to be all together. And with the 7th episode as this kind of like, oh yeah, we got to tie up all these ends of things that we were mentioning about, like Beach House and these terrorist groups, and we got to now wrap this all up. And so they do that in a nice little bow.
Oh, episode 7 of that OVA is one of the more satisfying final episodes of an OVA I can think of. Not because, to your point, it's like, oh, finally we have resolution on all these things. More just like, thank you. You brought in all this stuff. You address all of it in a fun, exciting, action-y, adventure-y, slightly dramatic way, and at the end, boom, okay, good, thank you. I don't ask for much, but yeah, it's cool. And Game Escape, I think you're absolutely right in the chat, that the mundane quality of the OVA is kind of one of the things that makes it endearing, that it is just these people doing this job, and it's kind of like NCIS, where there's a lot of just these people at their desks, doing research, right, chatting with each other, just kind of going about their work.
It's funny you say that, bring up NCIS. Because now I remember seeing in chat or in the Discord, someone bringing up Made in Japan.
Oh yeah,
that's where this came from.
Hey, ha! Law and Order and Giant Robots. There we are.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, not far off. But yeah, totally. And I think also it's interesting because the characters, it takes a little while for all the characters to come together, but then it definitely, the other odd thing is that once you get all the characters together, like, oh, it's Urusei Yatsura, it's Ranma, it is very much this group of characters who are designed to bounce off each other and be, this person needles that person needles that person, and here's how it all, I mentioned in some of my panels the idea of wa, which is this Japanese term referring to the effective functioning of a group, that, a group can work together even if they don't like each other, but they can just be exactly right for each other, because they're able to push each other in all the right ways. And this is very much one of those groups where, they may yell at each other and they may really tick each other off in various ways, but they need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's also interesting, getting back to what we were saying about the society, seeing the different little hints they drop in about Japanese society. The idea that there are these giant, massive traffic jams all over the place. The idea that the cops are just stopping traffic for things. Things that you would never imagine the police in Japan doing in the late 80s. The idea that the Patlabors are armed with these massive guns, and just those little hints about, oh, things are a little different now. Things have changed for Japan as a society. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, when you watch this, and you definitely feel late 80s or early 90s of Japan in there with the just the all the massive construction and the tie-ups in traffic, which, by the way, should you all in Chatland decide to, and I hope you do, go into the Patlabor franchise, that is a running joke throughout the whole thing. It's just Tokyo traffic. It's a running joke. It goes through the whole thing. But it's really kind of funny because, again, it talks to the accessibility of the show itself. There's in the traffic jam, you have the guy. Okay, so the series starts off with the chief engineer waiting for the new Patlabor, and he's really excited. He's this old guy, and this is the culmination event of his life, of his professional life, and it's delayed because of traffic. And so it goes from him standing out in the field in sunshine and the plane flying overhead on reclaimed land, by the way. They make a big deal about that.
Yeah.
And then it keeps going on and going on as it's going later and later to the point where it's at night. He's got a table, a phone, and a kettle and lights, and he's just sitting there. And he's just like, darn it, I am here to see the Patlabor, and I'm not moving until this happens.
Yeah. And again, it's that hint of society not breaking down, but definitely straining with all of these changes.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to me. While at the same time having things like, they all go home for New Year's, and there's Noah, eating natto or whatever. That's not natto, but the sticky thing, and just all the very traditional. Here's your sake. All of those things are just the way they are. It's really interesting. There's that kind of. It's one of the fun things about the series is you get a sense of. Anime is not real life. I don't know if you figured that, if you on chat and noticed that.
What?
I know.
What?
I know.
You just crushed my soul, my hopes and dreams. What do you mean? It's not real.
And even shows like Ranma or Urusei, which are definitely set in Japan, are a very heightened reality, and you don't see too much of kind of real everyday life. And even when you do, it's often like this idealized Japanese, kind of almost like. Leave It to Beaver over here kind of, life.
Yeah.
Whereas Patlabor feels much more like, this is actual working people in Japan stopping for noodles at a random shop. There's a guy there. I love the fact that the people working at the noodle shops are often like surly.
Yeah.
Not everyone is like, oh, thank you for being here, sir.
Yeah.
Like, sure, here, whatever.
Yeah.
800 yen. Get out of here. It's very. As a Ninja / Gundam pilot, I'm pretty sure anime is real. Well, it's real for you, and I applaud you for that. But yeah, it's really it's just Patlabor is interesting for that. So let's talk a bit about the dub, because I want to talk about the dub. In the Discord, when I was talking about watching this, I forget who it was in the Discord was saying that they had they would be interesting to see my reaction to the dub. The dub is all over the place on this one. I mean, and first I want to call out Goto. Rarely have I heard a better match for a voice than Goto's English dub actor. He manages to capture that, again, sort of world-weary, I've seen it all thing without sounding dead inside. He's able to emote. He's able to do all that stuff, while just getting across like that character really, really well, and for a character who could come across very boring. Never feels boring. Then you have Noah.
I'm sorry, I have to laugh because this is the bone of contention for the series. Well, go ahead.
Here's the thing. Because again, I listened to the Japanese dub for the first 4 episodes and the English dub for the last 3, and I do think there's a thing. There's a thing that they did in the earlier anime dubs where they would listen to the Japanese voice and tell the actor to sound like the Japanese voice, or they would try to hire an actor that would sound like the Japanese voice. Female anime voice actors in Japan often pitch their voices rather high, And so I think they wanted Noah's English voice actor to sound like that. It just sounds unnatural in English. To pitch yourself that high. And that's a lot of the problem. She's, a lot of the other stuff, she makes some interesting choices, but not like, oh my gosh, I don't understand why you made that choice. But just that timbre is just off enough that it's kind of off-putting. I didn't hate it, but one of those things was like, architecture, engineering choice there that I think wasn't very helpful.
Yeah. So when you watch other people see it for the first time, and the English dub, and she does Noah's voice, because her voice is different than that, and this is what I see people reacting when Noah speaks for the first time in an excited way. When she gets excited, her character gets excited, and you see people kind of doing this. Okay. Can we go back to Godot? He's more reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, nothing against the actress. I just think that their approaches were made there.
Yeah.
That was Elisa Wayne. Don't know what else she's done. And at least that dub. But yeah, that's weird. Also, can I just point out the fact that in the opening credits sequence, that's her running in the park, right?
Yeah.
But she has black hair.
So yeah. That was the original character design.
Oh. Okay.
But they changed her so that they could put later on a joke. It's not a joke. It's a thing between her and Azuma.
Okay.
And I don't want to spoil it, but it has to do with her hair, tomatoes, and their relationship.
Okay.
And that's all I'm going to say about it. But the original character design is that her hair is black.
Okay, interesting. Okay, that explains that.
Yeah.
Then you've got Ota, the gun nut, and boy, I forget who it was in Discord who described it as what was it that I'm forgetting, but that. Ota is the best bad, voice acting. Where it's kind of pushing towards over the top, but like it works.
Yeah.
That's how I felt.
There's one scene in particular towards the beginning where he wants practice with the gun, and Goto explains the whole bureaucracy of it all, and he's being dragged off by Shinji, and he's just screaming off camera almost. It's just like, but I want the gun. I want to shoot a gun. Let me shoot the gun. He's just screaming, and his voice just fades away. Oh my god! And have you ever noticed in the series that he can't hit a damn thing?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So here's this guy who's just loving guns. He's loving all this stuff, and he cannot draw a bead on anything worth the state of his life. Literally.
Yeah. Funny, my dad has a story. When he went into the army, basic training, they had I think M16s, and I think he said they were like the first unit to get M16, something along those lines. So they weren't used to this weapon, and so went out to the firing range. None of them had ever fired a weapon before. They said, okay, point, pull trigger, and he said. Everyone was freaking out. That I was freaking out, but I heard the instruction. I said he must know what he's doing. Bang, almost a bullseye. Okay, bang, bang, and the sergeant came down and said, "Okay, you're going in the special class." My dad was like, "Oh crap." He just, one of those things where just. In the moment, he just let it all go, and he managed to fire really well. And everyone was like, "Ooh, you're good at this." I don't want to be good at this. I'm just,
No, this is not a thing.
Whereas I'm sure all the guys were like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be great." And bang, 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 bang. But yeah, totally. So yeah, and again, it's one of those weird things where Ota is very much this. Comedic character, right? He's you're not going to take him at all seriously. So I do appreciate the fact that they they made that choice. It's just I mean, he should be ridiculous. Like that is the point. And then everyone else again in the voice is fine. Like everyone else, like you know, some things are a little dull. The voice actors who played
Shinobu.
No,
Kanuka.
maybe it was no, not Shinohara. I'm looking back through. Where is it? Sorry. Yes, Nagamo. Shinobu. Yeah. You know, fine. Whatever. It's weird. Like it's just not weird, but it's just kind of this whole spectrum. Whereas the Japanese voice cast, I was like, okay, fine. Like, everyone seems to be hitting their marks, but like nothing remarkable. It's totally cool. But anime voice acting in English has definitely different than it used to be. It is just all over the place. Because again, they hire different people. Like that is that. So I'm trying to think what else. Patlabor OVA. It's like I said, I enjoyed it because I think for me, I was able to appreciate the fact that it is kind of a bunch of different things all at once. That it is comedy, it is action, it's kind of police procedural. It's not much police procedural, I'll admit, but it's kind of there. And it's, but again, it can also be kind of that tense melodrama, NCIS Law and Order kind of thing of,
Right.
you know, will the bomb go off kind of thing. And it shifts between all of those things just on a whim, almost.
Yeah, it's if you treat each story as its own story, which it is, okay, that made a lot of sense. So if you treat each story just as its own thing, it's pretty enjoyable to watch. Mm-hmm. It's you know you don't get a message at the end of every at the end of every episode, but there are things that they talk about, and there's some things that are talked about seriously, which is like, for example, guns. Actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's an entire episode devoted to an event that happens, and Oda overreacts. But imagine that, Oda overreacting to something and using his firearm in the wrong way, and coming to learn that there were blanks put into his gun for this very purpose because they knew he was going to do that. But it's like a huge thing that they go through to learn about, you know, and this is another facet of more Japanese society than it is ours when it concerns firearms. And it's funny and it's weird and it's just kind of this like weird story that goes through. And at the end of it, you realize, okay, this is pretty serious, because what they're talking about is about if this had been real and Oda had, you know, overreacted and treating the gun like a toy, like he was doing, somebody could have gotten really hurt, and instead of just property damage. And it's a huge big deal because, you know, the gun laws are a lot different in Japan than they are here. And this is not, by the way, I don't want to get into a whole, you know, Second Amendment thing, whatever. I'm just saying that it's different. Right. It's different over there. They look at it differently. And that episode kind of drives that point home, where they say, you know, this is a real thing. Now, another thing that I found interesting about this series in terms of firearms is that when they make the shotgun for the Sea Monster episode, you know, Shige, who's the master or one of the chief mechanics there, he builds it out of spare parts. Now, that is a thing. That was a thing in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, where illegal arms dealers in Japan, because it was hard to get firearms into Japan, I had to buy them off Army bases, U.S. Army bases, or you made your own. And so a lot of people who dealt with firearms learned how to make their own.
Gotcha.
So when they were talking about how Shige made this huge shotgun for it, and they show it being in Oda using it. I think it was Oda using it at a target in the bay, and everyone's like cheering because he blows it up. Goto just goes, "Oh, this is a horrible idea. This is a horrible idea." but you get those issues that that come in,
And
and
which is interesting for a mecha series, where mecha series typically all about the guns, all about the cool new technology. No, 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 no. We
no,
don't
no,
want
no,
this.
no. This is such a bad idea, and it also drives another point home about the whole story of OVA, Special Vehicle Unit 2, which is their name. There's a designation. Is that this is brand new.
Yeah.
So when they introduced the Patlabors, this is all brand new technology. This is all brand new everything. So everyone's literally making it up as they go along. So when you look at this and you go, well, why are they in the airport hangar on reclaimed land out in the middle of nowhere? It's because they don't really know how to use these things, and the last thing you want is someone like Oda to be tromping around, or like I keep threatening to go over to Japan and steal the Gundam. I mean, that's the last thing anybody wants is the big white guy in the Gundam wandering around Tokyo.
Where did they build that life-size Gundam? On reclaimed land?
Yeah. So, but that's so that's kind of one of the points of the story is that they're all feeling their way through this job because it's brand new to everybody.
Yeah. It's also interesting seeing how, again, in episode 7, this is not a spoiler, Noah goes home and faces like really quite strong pressure from her family of, why aren't you married yet? You can't hold down a job. This isn't gonna work. You got to get married. You got to get married. You got to get married. She's like, nope.
Yep.
Don't care.
Don't care. Not my thing.
Yeah. Which and obviously, those roles have changed dramatically over time. But even then, late '80s, like that was a pretty strong statement to make in the sense that there's certainly plenty of women holding down jobs by that point. But to have a female character just kind of put her foot down at that point in the OVA and say, nope, this is my choice. I'm going to do this. I do not care what you're going to say. It was definitely a little bit of female empowerment there.
Well, and I would have to say that if you were given the choice of driving a Patlabor as a police officer as opposed to taking over the family business of being a liquor store owner in Hokkaido, I think I'd take the Patlabor job. Exactly. I think that'd be the more appropriate one.
Definitely, yeah. I think that when Asuma calls her, he's like, "Why are you in Hokkaido?" Like
yeah. Why are you so far away?
Why would anyone live there?
And I just think it was that whole scene where he and the old man, the father, are drinking sake on New Year's Eve, and they're just gunning it back, and so finally he sees the two of them argue, Azuma and Noah argue it, and he's just like, forget it. He just gives up because he's clearly seeing what's going on.
It is one of the fascinating things about the show is that you do get to see these bits of Japanese society that you wouldn't otherwise, and in just kind of a fun, lighthearted way in a lot of ways. I guess one of the things I appreciate about the show is that, to that point, is it never dwells on any of these themes long enough to feel preachy. It's more, here's a thing, here's a thing, here's a thing, here's a little note, and you can kind of enjoy that or just ponder that and then move on.
Yeah. Now the series, the OVA does give you, it's pretty obvious that they wanted to do a lot with the series. Mm-hmm. It's very obvious. One of the things that they did was, of course, the relationship between Shinobu and Goto. Mm-hmm. And how that was, Goto is like, he's almost like a puppy dog with her. He follows her everywhere.
Oh, there's a scene in episode 7 where they smile at each other, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. So that gets explored, a little bit more exploration. But one of the things that, if you notice at the end of one of the episodes, one of the things that you learn is that in episodes 5 and 6, where they're talking about the takeover of Tokyo and the guy who's the enemy, mm-hmm. You come to learn that they were friends in college, he and Goto, and then people keep asking Goto, are you on that guy's side or not? I mean, what are you doing? And he doesn't answer.
Yeah.
He never answers. But the enemy says, it's at the end of that story arc where he goes, it's amazing what two people started, but then 20 years later, how they grow apart.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of figure out that, oh wait, Goto was something else
Yeah.
back in his life,
Well,
and that gets explored.
okay. Well, and you're absolutely right. They mentioned all that stuff, and I was like, okay, that's interesting for this villain. And then the episode ends with a freeze frame on the villain's face, which they then
Yep.
hold through the entire end credits.
Yep.
Okay, they're definitely this is not the end of this plot line. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy. Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's one of the fun things about it too. I guess is that you do feel that larger world. You do feel like there's a lot more that they're that they want to explore that they just can't because of time. And yeah, that said, definitely like the animation quality is, boy, that's hard to find. Again, it varies.
Boy, does it vary. Yeah.
There's some gorgeous shots. There's that truck in episode 7. Holy mackerel!
Yeah. There are some great shots in this anime where, particularly with the mecha or anything mechanized, that in there where it's really really nice, and then some of it's just like wow, we rushed through that one, but they're skipping on the hours that week.
Yeah,
all right.
It's definitely all right. Let's cut to the bad guys, and they're standing there, still standing there.
There.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
Amazing powers of being able to stand still for that long. Wow.
Yeah. It's atmosphere. Like, it's all atmosphere.
Yeah. But then you get the truck scene, like you're talking about the truck scene, and it's just like you're like, holy crap. It's just like someone took time on that. They got the hours that week. It's just...
Yeah, clearly, like Animation or Kuromi, like some guy spent 3 months destroying that thing. Gosh, yeah, it's nuts, and it's a good example of the power of the OVA, where you're not on that budget. We were seeing it. This came out over the course of about a year, so you had a couple of months between each episode. And so you can kind of you can put the time in to those things where you can, and where you can't, that's that's the nature of any production. But you can really make it like sing in those moments.
And if you are a military kind of mech kind of person, where you want to see an actual, again, talking about how it's not like Gundam where everything's super articulated, but this is actual mechanical, limited movement and limited ability and what they can do and things like that. This is probably the most realistic military mecha that you see in a lot of anime.
I mean, is this a spoiler? Whatever. Gasaraki, they spent a lot of time trying to be very grounded, but they also were like, and the musculature is kind of aliens, maybe? I don't know. They're like, some of this technology is just impossible, and we're just gonna live with that and move on. And Patlabor still, it is hard to move 5 tons of metal.
Right.
But still, you're absolutely right. Like it feels like people thinking through what this would feel like in real life. Totally.
I mean, putting a 20 millimeter Vulcan cannon on the shoulder of a thing where we're used to blazing swords and just, big mega guns and the dance of the missiles and all that stuff. And in Patlabor, you get a 20 millimeter Vulcan cannon, and you get a wonderful scene of what an old mecha can't do. When they actually have to put it in the back of a pickup truck.
That's right.
To get it to move. And just merely by shooting the gun, the whole thing just falls to pieces.
Well, this is one of the things I really appreciate about it, is that these mecha move around on flatbed trucks.
Yep.
And like they've been modified to have little bars to come out to sort of keep them in place. But it's not, magic latching technology that, flies out anywhere. No, it's just, raise the bed how often it comes. Like it's very reasonable. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Patlabor OVA for me was a really fun introduction to the franchise, and it hits enough different tones that you'll find something to enjoy in any given piece of it. So, yeah. So, yeah. 2 thumbs up.
Oh, 2 thumbs up.
Cool. All right, we'll be back in just a few minutes to talk about what is going on in the world. And until then, we'll be right back.